Hi there, I'm Jen, this is Remembered Reads, and this is going to be the spoiler tag. The spoiler tag was created by Scott and Nell from Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and I was tagged by Matt from Paperback Junkie. I will link to both of those channels down below. Question number 1 is, what do you consider a spoiler? I'm not personally perturbed by spoilers. However, if I'm talking to somebody else, I would consider any plot or character revelation in a work of fiction on which hangs some kind of dramatic moment that some people's enjoyment might hang on if they are focused on that kind of revelation when it comes to their enjoyment of stuff. He was dead all along, it was Earth all along, they all did it, he was his father, it was the sled, etc. All of those things are spoilers, but even if you don't know them, then you don't know what they're from. And I think you just absorb a lot of that from pop culture. So question number 2 is, does the genre that you're reading impact what you consider a spoiler? As I said, personally, I don't read for that kind of revelation, or my enjoyment isn't derived from the revelations. So it doesn't really have an influence on me, because this is March, so it's March Mystery Madness, but I tend to read mysteries for a lot more for the setting than for anything else. For example, if I'm reading Beverly Graves Meyer's Tito Amato series, I'm reading that because I want to spend time Baroque castrato opera singers, more so than because I want to find out who the murderer was. If I'm reading one of Charles Todd's Ian Rutledge mysteries, it's because I want to hang out in the 1920s with this shell-shocked First World War veteran, more so than because I want to find out who the murderer was. This morning I just finished Sheena Kamal, It All Falls Down, in which the main character is looking into some family secrets and being chased by possible triad connections, and that's all very dramatic, but I'm mostly there because I want to see these Vancouver characters doing stuff, because I used to have to go to Vancouver all the time for work, and I haven't for several years, and I want to go and have this Vancouver experience with these very Vancouver stereotype people, kind of, and that is where I'm getting my enjoyment. So no, the genre doesn't have an influence on whether I consider things spoilers or not, because I don't care, regardless. Although, not talking about myself, but about how I would review or discuss something, I do think there are some genres in which it really doesn't matter at all, especially if you're looking at anything that's very non-linear, whether it's literary fiction or experimental fiction, or I think there's some science fiction that crosses over with those and that it is more about the style than the plot, and any of that kind of thing. I really think that caring about spoilers in a book that happens in reverse order, for example, is a little ridiculous. But question number 3 is, all the best bits are in the trailer. Sometimes a synopsis can be too detailed. Do you research books prior to going into them, or do you read them blind? Not so much that I go in researching them, but I tend to find out about them because I was researching something else. Like, I will sometimes be looking for nonfiction about a specific era, and when you look for book recommendations, you get fiction with that setting. And then I end up reading some of those books knowing that it's in that setting, and because the setting is what I care about, that's what drives me to read a bunch of stuff that has that setting regardless of what genre it's in and what happens with the plot. So yeah, I don't usually go in knowing nothing about a book, because I usually find out about books through some other kind of research. I always say this, back when the Globe and Mail had a proper book review section, I used to always read that, and having read those very detailed reviews used to pull my library holds based on that. So I don't go in knowing nothing, and I don't try to. Question number 4 is, sometimes the introduction or translator's notes can spoil the ending, especially for classics. Has this ever happened to you? I don't know, I feel like for most classics, things, especially anything that's well known, it is so out there in the culture that it feels almost ridiculous to try to not be spoiled. I went and reread a bunch of plays of Euripides a while ago because the Tarragon Theatre here in Toronto was doing Orestes, and I missed their online presentation because obviously things aren't happening in real life here. And I went through and I read the other plays in this collection, Electra and Medea and whatnot. And I'm not actually sure if I've read those plays before, or if it's just that I've seen operas based on them before. Because it's just part of the culture, right? And I feel like that's true for not just books, not just classic books, but film. I mean, I don't think you can watch a movie like Rear Window and not know what's happened, because there have been so many children's TV shows that play off of that, for example. So if it's been a musical, if it's been an opera, if it's been a Disney movie, you know what's happening in that story. And even if you don't, if it's so obscure for that, I don't know why you wouldn't want to know the cultural framework around it, because I think that's more interesting than the plot. But that could be me being more interested in the peripheral stuff, so I don't know. I don't know that that was the real question. To answer the main question, I really like translators' notes and introductions and afterwards, and I will often read the notes in the back before I read the main material, actually. So Question number 5, name a time somebody spoiled a novel for you. I cannot think of one. I know when I was a very small child, my grandfather spoiled the big Star Wars reveal for me. It was the early 80s, so you can guess what that was. But I don't think it ruined my... it didn't ruin my Star Wars experience. I have this. Look, the snow speeder from Empire Strikes Back is up there. Sorry. When I was in high school, one of my classmates was really outraged. He'd seen The Crying Game and he was mad about the twist, which is a gender twist that I don't think people would do in a film today, but in those days that was big, like, don't reveal the twist. And he described it in great length, and I later watched that movie, and knowing the gender thing didn't bother me, without getting into the cultural messaging of that, which obviously looked different, 25 years ago than it does now. But in spoiler terms, it didn't change my experience knowing the things. I had read spoilers of The Sixth Sense before I saw that movie. So yeah, I genuinely don't care about spoilers. Question number 6 is, have you ever spoiled a novel for somebody else? Quite possibly, because people have such differing sensitivities about what is a spoiler. And I try not to reveal anything that's major, and especially in something like a mystery or a plot-driven novel. And frankly, because I tend to focus on peripheral things, I sometimes forget to talk about the main plot anyway. I think I talked about Heinlein's The Moon is a Harsh Mistress without ever really talking about the AI-driven revolution that is the main plot of that, because I was really more interested in the peripheral stuff. So it's entirely possible that I've spoiled things, but I try not to do anything major. And when I do talk about things that are major plot points, I do try to put spoilers on the screen or something, some kind of spoiler notification on the screen so people know that it's coming, because I'm not bothered by talking about it, but I do like to warn other people because I know that I may be an outlier on this, although I've seen a lot of people do this tag and also not be bothered by spoilers. Question number 7 is, if spoilers ruin novels, are there things you can't reread? And no, because they don't ruin novels for me. Question number 8 is, when you are reviewing, are you spoiler free, and does this limit your ability to discuss? I kind of answered that already, but I'm not always spoiler free, but I try to give a warning if I'm not going to be, and I tend to be spoiler free just by accident because I sometimes forget to talk about the actual plot, because that's not really what interests me a lot of the time. And I think it helps that a lot of times what I'm talking about are nonfiction, which you can't spoil because things have happened, and if you're aware of the world, you should know that history is a thing that happened. And also with comics format books, even if it's fiction, a lot of times I'm more focused on the art than the plot. So yeah, I think that's I just don't talk about plot that often, I think. And question number 9 is to tag some people. I'm going to tag 2 people who have tagged me in tags that I filmed and the video didn't work out, so I don't know if I can salvage those or not. And that is Kathy from The Grim Reader, who tagged me in the F'd Up tag, and Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures, who tagged me in the Jeopardy tag. I'm still getting to those, but shout out to them. I'll link both of them below. And yeah, that was this tag. Because it is March Mystery Madness, and I think mysteries do tend to be more based on spoilers if you are more interested in plot than I am, so I would additionally like to tag anybody who's taking part who hasn't already been tagged, because I know Matt tagged all of the co-hosts, but everybody who's participating, consider yourself tagged as well. If you are also someone who does not care about spoilers, I'd love to hear about whether or not you've spoiled things accidentally for people, or if you're like me and you forget to talk about the plot sometimes. Anyway, that's it for now. Ciao.